Hi, I'm Brandon Wright, and this is Brian Wright, my brother. We are photographers and the creators of CineStill.
We just released a video that was the day of shooting 400D in LA. We're going to be going through some of those photos, so you can watch that before for context, or you could just continue watching this video and go back and watch it later.
This video, we're going to go through all those photos and select some specific images where 400 dynamic especially shined, where it showed some of the unique features of the film and what makes it so special. Let's get into it. Okay, so we started the day at Griffith Park. It's a beautiful lookout location overlooking Hollywood. You can see downtown. You can sometimes, on a good clear day, like the day we went, all the way to Santa Monica. We wanted to try out 400D in a situation that it has a nice natural environment, it has greens, it has architecture, it has people. So Brian, I, and Linus went out, along with Colton, operating the camera like a boss, and we walked around Griffith Observatory in Griffith Park and just took some pictures. Take a look at Brian's shots. He shot with the Pentax 672 with the 75mm 2.8 lens.
Yeah, it's a great lens. And it was a great day with lots of clouds coming over, and so you get some overcast, some shadows, and really bright highlights. And this is really showcasing how 400D shines. There's a beautiful photo of Linus. This is a great example of how 400D can shine with some shade and get some nice skin tones out of it.
I think it was like slightly overcast right here. The clouds are coming in and out.
Yeah.
But really good skin tones, doesn't have an overly blue look, so very nice and overcast.
Yeah, and this other photo of Linus is one where we're shooting with him backlit, and that's very common for when you're shooting portraits out in natural light. You try to find the softer light for the skin tones, but you'll still get that really bright sunlight on the edge of the face.
Yeah, and it really held the skin tone, even in the overexposed regions on his face, which is nice.
And I also took another photo that really is basically wedding light photos.
Yeah, open shade. We're underneath some pine trees, really bright light behind me, but I'm pretty dark in the shadows. This is an example of, very often when we used to shoot weddings, had time to do the family group photos, best thing to do, go find a big tree. Hide under it, make sure that the light's even on everyone's face, and blow out the background. Luckily with film, it doesn't blow out. It retains all of the detail, as you can see here with 400D, probably 5 or 6 stops over in the back. Looks amazing.
I scanned this on the Fuji Frontier, kind of trying to get more of that wedding look, but you can see like I could have gone much darker or brighter, retain more highlight detail. Some people like their kind of portrait images to be warmer. Some people do like them cooler, or on the green side, which I don't prefer.
Yeah.
And this is how the film really should look, the way that it is actually presented here, in my opinion. But everyone has a different taste on how they want their images to look, and 400D has the ability to kind of go wherever you want with it.
Yeah, it's an extremely neutral, well-balanced color film that can be scanned either warm or cool, depending upon your preference.
That's the first shot of the day, I believe.
Yeah, I remember mentioning this in the video. I metered down for over here where the shadows are, and just let the rest of it just land wherever it does. Handled the overexposure in the background really well. It's very sharp, absolutely no grain seen. This was shot 6x6 on the Rollei SL66, so it's a medium format negative, no grain at all, ISO 400. Lots of detail. Okay, now this is the second shot I shot of the day. I had decided to do a bracketing test. So often with new films, it's fun to see what happens when you underexpose it, overexpose it, whatever. And a good way to do that is to shoot the same thing multiple times with different exposures, so that you take away any other variable except for what does the film do? Or how does my lab and scanner handle a well overexposed image? So for this one, I did a normal exposure, 2 stops over, and 4 stops over. So I rated the film at ISO 400, 100, and ISO 25. So as you can see here, beautiful, natural, warm tones in the dirt, greens come out nice, beautiful blues in this image actually. I love that dog, that husky. I had to snap it when that came through. And then I opened up 2 stops. You'll notice the depth of field got shallower. Not much of a difference here. Probably a little less rich contrast and saturation, but not highly notable. Blues actually look a little nicer, I think, a little overexposed. And then last one, this is 4 stops over, ISO 25. Totally fine. And that's one of the reasons why we are calling 400D dynamic, because it's a dynamic film. It's versatile. If you mess up your exposure, you're not going to lose anything. Besides the fact I was shooting an f2 lens and maybe misfocus on Linus a little, this image is just fine 4 stops overexposed. So don't be afraid. Shoot the film and know that it's got your back. It's versatile. So this one I shot accurate exposure, underexposed to stop, and overexposed to stop. So to kind of give that range. So ISO 400 looks great. Plenty of detail. You can see all the cloud detail. Shadows.
Plenty of detail.
Plenty of detail. Then I went ahead and stopped down and underexposed it. So this is rated at ISO 800. Technically underexposed. And that's for the highlights, underexposed. Looks great. The only area where it has a little bit of difficulty holding up is down here in the deep shadows by this bush. But as you can see, there's not really any grain. It doesn't get much color cast in the shadows at all. It holds up really well for underexposing, even when you don't push it. And then the opposite, overexposing. I actually really love the look of this scene overexposed because it really brings up those shadows, as you can tell compared to the last one. Now you can see all the leaves, all the detail. There's even more detail there than that. If you were to brighten it, you can go all the way into the bush.
Yeah, look at that dynamic range.
Yeah, and if you do that in scan, you won't lose the highlights. When you do it in post, highlights go. So that's another good thing about, like, when you get your scans back, if you feel like you blew your highlights, not on this film. Bring it back to the lab, have them scan it correctly. Those highlights should never blow. If your shadows block up, that's most likely because you underexposed. Then there was the tilt shift shot of my brother, love that image. Skin tone turned out really fantastic. The blue is really popping. It's not garish color, but it's really rich saturation. I love that image. Yeah, and this is just kind of like me point and shooting. I don't even think I metered for this shot. I just shot at 2.8 and 250, I think. It looks just great. And the last place we shot on that day was this big tunnel. I was excited to shoot this tunnel because with the bright sunlight coming in and hitting a person in the foreground with the tunnel in the background, you could see what the difference is when you have hard sunlight hitting someone and then deep, deep shadows in the background. Those shadows, like, this is a very long tunnel, so those shadows were probably 7-8 stops under.
Probably a stopover.
Yeah, probably a stopover, which looks really nice. But yeah, if you lighten the image, you can kind of see where the detail goes.
Never ends.
Never ends. So you don't need all that detail in the photo. So this Frontier is a great scanner. It picks up a lot of shadow detail, even though, like, you don't see it in the image. It's there. So if you had, like, something happening over here, like two birds fighting,
you could have scanned lighter.
Or you could dodge it out in post, because just lightening it, you can see the detail's there. It's out of focus, but it's there. Yet another reason this film is so dynamic.
And then I was shooting the Nikon FE2 along with the Pentax X7. Here's just some random snapshots I got. This is a great one right here of Linus and Brandon. I don't know what they're looking at, but yeah. Yeah, I love this shot because this is actually the way this film is gonna probably be shot a ton. People just hanging out with their friends, taking snapshots that turn out to be like beautiful portraits. I believe this was shot just at box speed. I shot aperture priority a little bit, but mostly adjusted the settings manually. And here's another great one where we're looking out from Griffith Observatory.
In the shadows.
And we're under a dark shadow of a cloud that was passing over, and then you can see all of downtown LA well overexposed. And you can see how tight this grain is. It still has a nice structure to it where it looks like film still. But look at that detail of the city. It's great in 35mm. But yeah, of course I scanned it for trying to get this detail in the foreground, and then just let the highlights fall where they may.
Yeah.
And I could have scanned it much darker, as you can see. You get much more detail in the background, but I felt like I liked this kind of high key look.
Yeah.
And you can get that out of this film very easily. Here's a good example of overexposing it. I overexposed this by probably 2 or 3 stops. As you can see, wherever there's very dark areas, and especially the wide angle lens like this, you'll still get a little bit of that glow, that halation, but not as intense as you'd see in 800T.
This is a good example of same image, just scanned 2 different ways. Slightly different exposure, but if you notice, the color's different. And that has everything to do with just what the scan operator decided. The film is not that color or that color. The film is actually orange when it comes out.
Yeah.
And
it's a negative.
Yeah, it has to be inverted by the scan operator, and they get to decide what the balance of warm versus cool is. But your best scan and your best color is going to come when it's correctly scanned at capture. because there's so much more detail in any negative than a scanner can ever fully capture. The scanner has to decide what region to capture, how bright it is, how dark it is, what the color balance is. But even in post, as you can see Brian's just doing really quickly, you could even make these two images match. Okay, cool. Now we get to the second section of the day. This is just early afternoon, still very bright light, very direct, a little less cloud cover I think at this point. This is when Jason and Linus were shooting. Go back and watch the video. It was a really fun segment, part 2. These images all turned out pretty great. I mean, honestly, really good exposures, some pretty cool captures, good framing. The film performed fantastic. I think there's a couple images in here that we'll highlight where there was some overexposure and some where there was a little bit of underexposure, and how 35mm handled that. My bracketing was on 120, so a little more forgiving when you have a larger negative. This image I love. I love the way that the color comes out, the rich blue sky. Look at that blacktop, super neutral. That's a perfect scan in my opinion. Very neutral, very accurate to life. This is what the film is really designed to do. Where you take it from there is up to you, like I mentioned. But this truck and the way that reddish burnt orange is coming through, I just really love it, and with the composition too.
And that dynamic range just really shines.
Yeah.
The stucco looks really nice. It's not flat and washed out. It has lots of detail in it. You can pick up all those little shadows. If someone, maybe wanted this shot to look more tobacco toned, you could do that.
Yep.
And if your lab wanted to do that, I would send it back to them.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of labs do, a lot of people like warmer photos. So labs intentionally scan a bit warm. So if this image came out like this from your lab, it still looks really cool, but it basically looks like to me that you put a warming filter on your lens.
Yeah.
Some labs like that. Some photographers ask their lab to do that. They say, I want my images warm. That's totally okay. It's kind of like when I put my sunglasses on, everything looks warmer. That's okay. I actually enjoy that. It's softer on the eyes. So up to you, but there's no one way that this film can render. It's versatile, it's dynamic. It's about having a good relationship with your lab, or really honing in your scanning style if you scan at home.
This is a great example of how this film will be shot a lot. In a point and shoot camera, walking around. You might shoot photos of people sometimes, but a lot of people will take scenic photos when they're on vacation. Facades and things like this, that it really shines because it can handle basically any situation.
Yeah. So I'll point at these two pictures because it looks like they may have been taken right after each other. So this one, it looks like a perfect exposure. Really good color, really good tonality. This one, I think it was probably the same settings, and there's just so much shadow detail that.
That's good.
Yeah, this looks perfect. It was muted perfectly for where the sun was, but where the shadows are, they kind of blocked up. And yeah, if we lighten it up here in the post, it's way underexposed down here in the bottom. So if he had metered here in the shrubbery, that background would have blown out on any digital camera, but not on film. That would have stayed as retainable detail, as I like to call it. A little less saturation back there, so you wouldn't have the bright, like the really rich orange in here in the bricks. It would get brighter and it would be a little bit more creamy, but it would hold that detail and you get this detail in the foreground. That's why a lot of people say, just meter for shadows and shoot. I love this one. This is a great image. It's a great composition with the road going up on the right and then splitting down on the left.
Also a nice exposure. I would
Super
maybe
nice.
change the coloring on this a little bit. I might warm it up a little.
Yeah.
Like that. And
Looks
then bring
nice.
my highlights down a little bit. Yeah, but you can kind of go wherever you want with it.
Yeah. Oh, there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit to your image in post.
Yeah, I like that better, actually. This is another photo. Looks like we might have switched perspectives who was shooting, because this is exposed differently. It looks like a different focal length. As you can see, this one is a little underexposed. It probably was metered when the sun was hitting directly on this stucco. Metered off of that, which leaves it a little underexposure because it tries to interpret this as middle gray, not white. And then a cloud started to come over and it cast more shadow, diffused the light here, and you can see lost some detail under the dark shade of the shadow in the background. There's a good one right here that's focusing on a chrome reflection of the sun.
So the sun will halate if you shoot a direct picture of it.
And you can see that when you lift up the shadows, this is metered with plenty of detail for the shadows, so it's probably a little overexposed even. And then you have a reflection of the brightness of the sun. You see some halation.
I really
I
like
actually
it.
like it
Yeah.
in this one. It looks really cool. I love the colors in this one.
Yeah, those colors are classic 400D. Nothing's overdone, but the rendering is very accurate. Nothing to hate about this photo. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is a perfect exposure. You can see detail inside the houses. You can see beautiful colors that, like, the red is not blocking up. You can see different tones in it. Yeah, this might be my favorite shot. I love the lines from the telephone wires. Are not distracting. I feel like they lead into the image. It's just a great shot.
Okay, so yeah, now I think we just got onto the section where Henry and Linus were shooting together. A little later in the day, but still pretty, yeah, those shadows are getting a little bit longer. I wasn't there, but I really love this section of the video. Henry's a really great street photographer and fun to watch.
I love scanning these photos. They're just solid exposures, just really well done, and just look how awesome they are. Like, it makes you feel like you're there, present in that moment.
This is such a great shot. Guy doesn't even know he's getting his picture taken. You got this massive piece of machinery in the background getting ready to tear up some earth, and guy with a mask walking down the street just looking like a badass.
The finished video, I love how he's talking about taking this photo while walking, and he grabs it perfectly and then continues just talking about it.
So smooth.
I like how they are coupled up. And the guy, he also had like a t-shirt that had like the Hellraiser on the inside.
This is a great image with light and shadow going on. You know there's a palm tree. You know it's LA because, well, there's a palm tree back here, but immediately see these palm frond shadows in the foreground and the car about to come in, this guy walking across. Why is everyone so mean?
It's framed so perfect.
Yeah, it's great. This is Linus's portrait of Henry with the, what did he shoot, in a super wide angle?
Yeah.
Fisheye almost?
17 millimeter or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great portrait. And also it shows where you're down in this alley in the dark shadows and then really bright reflected light and direct sunlight up here in the sky. Totally handles the dynamic range.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. This is one of those photos, like when you're scanning it, you can kind of go wherever you want, really dark, really light, and it all looks like it could turn out fine. As you can see, there's a reflection of the sun in this window up here, and it's not blown out. It's got plenty of detail in it. And then you got the shadows. It's really well composed as well. So great execution on exposure for sure.
Yeah, and
Good job, Linus.
400D loves skin tones. I mean, the key thing is, I think if you're going to go with, if you're shooting a portrait in darker skin tones, don't underexpose. The more you underexpose, the more your dark tones are going to have grain and less contrast and less color. So
yeah, I always recommend to with anybody you're shooting, no matter what their skin tone is, to expose for the shadowed area of the face, because the film will really shine and become like better tonality and tighter grain, and that's what you really want in a portrait. I like this shot.
oh, this shot's crazy. Got some lens flare on it. The highlights are super awesome. You got a little bit, like that sky is super good blue, but where it's going really, really bright, it gets a little bit of pink to it, which kind of warms it up a little bit. Love it. A little bit of glow coming off of her jacket. Not really halation, but I think that's just the lens.
I think that's the lens,
because
yeah.
it's so bright right there.
And Stanley Tucci over here looking on. He knows.
Yeah, he knows. That's a great street photo.
Now it looks like we're getting into downtown LA, where B was shooting with Linus, and they had a model. Oh yeah, these are great. Yeah, these are awesome exposures. Just look at that detail and look at those. That skin tone is amazing. Again, 400D, I think it does great on any skin tone, whether you're of olive complexion or more reddish, pinkish complexion,
Like yours.
or brown or dark black, or anywhere in between. It just looks so nice. I mean, just look at that. And that's just one photo. I mean, we're gonna go through here. Oh my gosh, like look at this. Look at these colors. These greens are really green. They're not turning out a brownish green. They're not turning out yellowish or cyan. This is just like, it has a little bit of that, just almost a Pro 400H green, but more accurate. I mean, and then the blues. I love this shot. It's a great example. I hope we use it to show people how the film can look. Yeah, it looks like they used a reflector here. Reflectors are great for filling in shadows and getting some those catch light in his eyes.
Creating a little more direction.
Yeah, this is really nice. Oh, here's a really intense one. Looks like they're in deep shade, but there's some sunlight peeking through.
Yeah.
Those highlights look great.
Yeah.
You could pull them in more if you needed to.
Yeah.
I mean, this could have been scanned way darker for the highlights.
Yeah, this is a wildly dynamic shot.
That one I think is exposed a little bit better.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the down angle. It
got more light in
He
his
turned
face.
his face more towards the light source or the reflected light.
Yeah, so this one's actually, it's interesting. This one has a lot less color dynamic in the photograph. So it could actually, this one was the example of like, you could take this anywhere.
Like, look at that. You can make it golden, and it doesn't look wrong necessarily.
There's not a lot of neutrals in this. It's mono.
You could go warmer. You could go more in the reddish tones like that, or even take it back and go green, go more like a cool green if you want, and then darken it and make it look kind of
like none of those look bad on this one. This is an example where there's a lot of creativity you can express just in scanning your image.
Yeah, you can definitely kind of get whatever look you want. I scanned it, so odds are, yeah, I like it the way I scanned it. Great scene.
Little BTS.
Yeah, BTS would be shooting. She does a good job directing her models, and if you're ever shooting with a subject that's either a model or even not a model doing portraits, a big part of it, the challenge when you're already thinking so much about photography, is direction.
Yeah.
And she's really a great director.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. This one looks like, okay, so you can see these two shots. They're probably a little bit overexposed, maybe even. Yeah, no, they're probably accurate exposures. But this one, I can tell that the exposure dropped. I don't know if it was diffusion from a cloud or just maybe a lens change in camera.
You can tell because of those higher key tones have a lot of separation in them. They're almost landing in mid-tone range.
Yeah, it's very muted as well in the highlights.
But it looks dope.
Yeah, but yeah, you can see it still holds detail, but it might be a bit greenier in those shadows.
Yeah, that's maybe rated more closer to 640 or 800.
Yeah. Oh,
that looks like a Vogue photograph.
Yeah, this one is a good example.
Really creative use of like creating a background. That sky is the only thing you see behind the subject. That's a super awesome photograph. Maybe it's gold reflector.
Yeah, they're looking almost at the sun. For a tip for anybody who doesn't want halation,
meet her like this.
Meet her like this, because you can still get that shadow detail. It's a little grainier like we were talking about before, but you get those colors are still in there. You get a little less vibrancy in the color, but there should be a lot of halation if this was overexposed. This is pretty much stretching the range. I bet it's like 20 stops of exposure range in this one image.
Yeah, with those really bright sunlit clouds and he's in the shadows. Looks awesome. I love that image. Yeah, so that was basically, we went through all of the shoots that were done that day, multiple photographers with different perspectives, different styles, different methods of metering, and that's what 400D can look like. Hopefully we're able to show you the different ways that you can scan your film and know that like when an image comes back to you from the lab or your first thing you see on your scanner preview, that's just a starting point.
It's just one way that the film can look.
Exactly.
And you are actually in control of that. And the film is there as a baseline, and hopefully these scans serve as a baseline, as like a standard using a Fuji Frontier scanner, what it should look like coming from a professional lab, and what you can ask your local lab to try to emulate.
It's all about communication with your lab or your scanner tech, or figuring out your workflow.
Yeah.
So if you like the video, you want us to make more like this, be sure to comment and like below. Let us know your thoughts. I'm just really proud of all the great images that everyone was able to get in one day.
And if you like the film, it's coming very soon to general retail market this summer.
Once we've fulfilled to all the people who backed our campaign, thank you so much.
Yes.
It's going to be coming out retail this summer.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We're going to have some announcements coming along the way on that and keep you guys up to date.
And keep you entertained all along the way.
All right.
See you guys.